Throughout history, the greatest empires didn't fall because of a single battle. They weren't destroyed by a plague or a meteor or a foreign invasion. In almost every case, the superpower that ruled the world was killed by a silent assassin. An assassin that grew from within, invisible until it was too late. It wasn't a soldier. It was a number. There is a mathematical tipping point in the life of every nation. A specific moment where the cost of yesterday's promises becomes too heavy for today's economy to carry. Once a nation crosses this line, the outcome is no longer a matter of politics or policy. It becomes a matter of arithmetic. Historians call it the debt spiral. It destroyed the Roman Empire. It beheaded the monarchy of France. It turned the German mark into ash. And right now, in 2025, the United States has just walked past the final warning sign. The pattern is undeniable. The math is brutal. And if history is any guide, what comes next isn't just a recession. It is a complete reset of the world as we know it. To understand why this is terrifying, we first have to strip away the complex economic jargon. At its core, a debt spiral is simple. Imagine you have a credit card. You max it out. To pay the bill, you get a second credit card. Then a third to pay the second. For a while, you look rich. You have new clothes, a nice car, and you're eating at the best restaurants. But eventually, the interest payments alone become larger than your entire paycheck. At that exact moment, you are mathematically bankrupt. Even if you stop spending a single penny today, the debt from yesterday will still consume you. Now, apply this to a superpower. When a government reaches this point, they have only two choices. Choice A: default on the debt, admit bankruptcy, and crash the global economy instantly. Or choice B: print money to pay the bills. Spoiler alert, they always choose option B. They choose to print, and that is when the real nightmare begins. This isn't just a theory. We'll have the autopsy reports of 3 dead empires to prove it. Let's rewind 2,000 years to the gold standard of empires: Rome. The Roman Empire was built on the silver denarius. It was the dollar of the ancient world, pure, reliable, and accepted everywhere. But Rome had a problem. They loved to spend. We had massive armies to pay, grand public works to build, and free grain to distribute to the citizens to keep them happy. But they didn't like to pay taxes. So the emperors came up with a clever solution. They gathered up the silver coins, melted them down, and mixed in cheap metals like copper. They minted the same coin with the same face value, but with less silver inside. They thought they had created free money. At first, it worked. The party continued. But reality always catches up. By the time of Emperor Gallienus, the silver content of the denarius had dropped from 100% to just 5%. Merchants weren't stupid. They realized the coins were worthless. Prices skyrocketed. Soldiers refused to be paid in junk metal, leading to mutinies. The economy ground to a halt because nobody trusted the money anymore. Rome didn't fall because the barbarians were strong. Rome fell because its economy was already dead. Fast forward to France in the early 1700s. The French crown was drowning in debt. After the wars of Louis XIV, the country was effectively bankrupt. Enter a Scottish financier named John Law. Law was a genius and arguably the father of modern central banking. He told the French regent, "Gold is too restrictive. We need paper money." He created the Banque Generale and started printing paper notes. Backed by the potential wealth of France's colony in America, Mississippi Territory, he promised mountains of gold were waiting there. The French people went crazy. They traded their real gold for these paper shares. The stock price of the Mississippi Company went to the moon. But there was no gold in Mississippi. It was a swamp. When the public realized the truth, panic set in. Everyone rushed to the bank at once to convert their paper back into gold, but the bank had printed far more paper than it had metal. The system collapsed overnight. People who were millionaires on Tuesday were begging for bread on Friday. This financial humiliation destroyed the legitimacy of the monarchy, sowing the seeds of anger that would eventually lead to the guillotine and the French Revolution. And finally, the most terrifying example of all, the Weimar Republic, Germany, 1923. Crushed by war reparations after World War I, Germany couldn't pay its debts. So, the government turned on the printing press. They didn't just print a little, they printed industrial amounts. In 1922, the largest banknote was 50,000 marks. By late 1923, they were printing bills for 100 trillion marks. The stories from this time are chilling. People would order a coffee for 5,000 marks, and by the time they finished drinking it, the currency didn't just lose value, it died. And in the chaos and misery that followed, the German people were desperate for a savior. Any savior. That economic collapse paved the direct road for the rise of Adolf Hitler. 3 different empires, 3 different centuries. But if you look closely, they all followed the exact same script. It is a universal pattern of collapse that happens in 5 clear stages. Stage 1 is good money. The nation is rising. The currency is trusted, backed by gold or a strong economy. People save, invest, and build. Stage 2 is overreach. The nation becomes powerful and arrogant. It starts massive social programs or expensive wars. The government spends more than it earns, but because they are rich, nobody worries yet. Stage 3 is the debt mountain. Borrowing becomes the new normal. The government issues bonds to cover the deficit. The private sector follows suit. The debt grows faster than the economy. Stage 4 is debasement. This is the turning point. The debt is now so big that it cannot be paid back honestly. The government begins to manipulate the currency. In Rome, they clipped the coins. In the U.S. today, the Federal Reserve expands the balance sheet. The goal is to pay off old debts with new, cheaper money. This causes inflation. Stage 5 is the reset. The trust evaporates. The currency collapses. Wealth is transferred from the savers to the asset holders, and eventually, the system is forced to restart from zero. Here is the part that should keep you awake at night. If you look at the United States today, we are not in Stage 1. We are not in Stage 2. We have blasted through Stage 3. We are living deep inside Stage 4, and the door to Stage 5 is creaking open. Let's look at the hard numbers. No politics, just data. The U.S. national debt has now crossed $35 trillion. That number is so big it's meaningless to the human brain. So let's put it in perspective. It took the United States 200 years to accumulate its first $1 trillion of debt. Today, we are adding $1 trillion of debt every 100 days. Read that again. What took 2 centuries now takes 3 months. But the debt total isn't the thing that kills you, it's the interest. Just like that credit card, you have to pay service charges. In 2024, for the first time in history, the United States government spent more money paying interest on the debt than it spent on the entire national defense budget. Think about that. The greatest military superpower on Earth is now spending more to service its past mistakes than to defend its future. This is the definition of a debt spiral. The government has to borrow more money just to pay the interest on the money it already borrowed. It is a mathematical loop of doom. And remember Stage 4. Debasement. Since the pandemic, the U.S. has printed roughly 40% of all U.S. dollars that have ever existed. This is why your grocery bill is up 30%. This is why housing is unaffordable. It's not just supply chains. It is the currency losing its value because there is too much of it. Rome clipped coins. We click a mouse button at the Federal Reserve. The method is different, but the result is identical. The world is watching, and the world is preparing. Why do you think central banks in China, Russia, and the Global South are buying gold at the fastest pace in history? Why are countries making trade deals in yuan or local currencies, bypassing the dollar? Because they know the history. They know that when the dominant superpower enters the debt spiral, the end of its currency's dominance is near. They're building lifeboats while the band plays on the deck of the Titanic. So, what happens next? What does Stage 5 look like in the 21st century? If the United States cannot get its spending under control, there is zero political will in Washington to do so. The outcome is binary. Scenario 1 is a deflationary crash. The government stops printing, the debt bubble pops, banks fail. And we enter a Great Depression that makes 1929 look like a picnic. Scenario 2, the far more likely path, is hyper-stagflation. The Fed prints money to save the government from defaulting. The stock market might go up in nominal terms, but the real value of the dollar crashes. Imagine a world where a gallon of milk costs $20, where your pension fund is technically solvent, but the check you receive can barely cover your electric bill. This is the transfer of wealth. It steals purchasing power from the workers and savers and hands it to the owners of hard assets and the government. When empires fall, the process is usually described by a quote from Ernest Hemingway. Gradually, then suddenly, we have been in the gradual phase for 50 years. We are now inching toward the suddenly. This sounds bleak, and it is. But the purpose of history isn't to scare you, it is to prepare you. The collapse of the Roman denarius was a disaster for the average Roman who held all his wealth in coins. But for those who owned land, who owned gold, who owned productive businesses, they survived. Some even thrived. The system is shaking. The math is undeniable. The debt spiral is spinning faster every single day. You cannot stop the macroeconomic machine, but you can choose where you stand when the machine breaks. Don't be the person holding the paper when the music stops. If you want to understand how to navigate this shift and protect what you've built, make sure you are subscribed. We are going to explore the lifeboats in our next video. I'm Channel Name. This is Economy Rewind. And remember, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes.